So everyone knows what the Twilight Zone is, right? Did you know it had a 2002 revival? Like, this was on primetime television, but I barely hear anyone talk about it. The whole thing is uploaded for free on YouTube, not by like CBS or whoever owns the show. It's just a bootleg that's available on YouTube. So like even CBS completely forgot this show existed. And like why? Why does no one talk about this version? I mean, maybe people just watched like the first 5 minutes and then the intro came on and then they clicked off.
We're traveling to another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind.
But other than that, why isn't this talked about? So yeah, in 2002, there was a revival of the Twilight Zone, hosted by Forest Whitaker. It technically only lasted for 1 season, but it got 43 episodes, so there is a lot to talk about here. I won't be discussing every episode, because I don't really see the point in that. So I'm just going to talk about the ones I find most notable for whatever reason. Also, there will be spoilers for all of these episodes, so if you don't want to hear that, just skip to the end, I guess, but at that point, what's the point of watching the video? So I think I may know what alienated people from this series. This was the very first episode to premiere on CBS in 2002, and I have no idea why they would choose this one. Spoilers for this video, but I do like this episode, but I can admit that it's a terrible pilot episode. Like, this episode is much darker than anything from the original series or the 80s series. And there's no karmic twist element that's in almost all the original series episodes. So I can definitely see why people would watch this episode and go, this doesn't feel like Twilight Zone, I'm gonna check out. But as its own thing, I think it is good. A rowdy, troublemaking girl moves into a new town and she discovers that the people in this town keep peace by turning troublemaking kids into fertilizer. Yeah, like I said, it's a much darker tone for a Twilight Zone episode, but I do like what this episode has to say about conformity and valuing order over people. And obviously this show deals with issues that are very of the time.
Your parents are providing you a haven from the outside world with its drugs, gangster rap, violent movies.
But I like how this show tackles these issues, and a lot of these episodes are very post 9/11 in their own way. But what I really enjoy is that most of the episodes aren't on the nose about it. They're subtle enough that they can still work today. And I also enjoy that this episode isn't like preachy. You know, the main girl, she is a dick.
You should apologize, Daddy.
Did she apologize to me when she nearly burned down her school? Did she apologize to anyone?
She's not a saint or anything. But I like that because it's like, yeah, even though she is a dick, she didn't deserve to be made into fertilizer. Although apparently the IMDb reviews agree with me and the YouTube comments agree with me. But apparently a lot of people don't agree with me because all over the IMDb reviews of this episode are people saying that the town was justified. Much darker than what you would have seen in the original series, and I'm okay with that. A family moves into a gated community called Evergreen. It soon becomes obvious that their oldest daughter is a real piece of work. And, the show did a great job of making you hate her. As a former therapist and teacher, I could actually empathize a lot with the parents in this one. Some kids just seem to need the Evergreen treatment. Well made and made me want to see more. She's annoying. She deserves to die. I particularly enjoy this one scene where the town is voting on who to turn into fertilizer next.
No. I want you to remember that Logan will always have a place in this community. We've already picked out a beautiful spot for his tree.
For God's sake, he's my only child.
A number of us have sent kids off to Arcadia, myself included. But it must be done for the good of this community. And people, let us not forget that we've saved plenty more than we've lost. Plenty more. And if we have to toss out a few bad apples, I say it's worth it.
My only real problems with this episode are related to the presentation. There's some very early 2000s direction, like some of the edits and just the funky lenses they're using. Like there's this one scene where the parents drug the girl, and there's way too many Dutch angles. It is so early 2000s. And sadly, all that stuff is present throughout the entire show, so you just have to get used to it or stop watching. Also, the ending monologues suck. Like, I think Forrest Whitaker does a good job delivering them. They're just so short and barely say anything.
The Winslows have finally taken back control of their family, but it cost them one teenage daughter. A deal brokered only in the Twilight Zone.
So yeah, that is Evergreen. It is a good episode, but a terrible first episode. The first episode of a show like this should really be something that is familiar but different, and this one feels like it's too different. For an episode that is the other side of that coin, so a doctor saves a mysterious patient who claims that he is death. This one has the funniest cut to the intro out of any of the episodes.
I am death.
So anyway, Death decides to quit his job, and it results in nobody dying during a full day. I really love how they explore this concept, this idea of Death being just a dude who's sick of his job, and our main character, this doctor who's so obsessed with stopping death at all costs.
You've got to stay strong here.
So you think I'm doing the right thing?
Hell yes.
Could be drawbacks.
Well, like overpopulation?
Yeah, the world could get pretty crowded.
Well, we can deal with that.
I like your attitude.
Don't you see? This changes everything. What you've done here is... it's a miracle.
But of course, it wouldn't be Twilight Zone without a twist. And it turns out that people aren't dying, but some people really should be dying.
We need some more.
Look at the monitors. There's no heart rate, no blood pressure, nothing.
Well, then there must be something wrong with the monitors.
I'm getting no blood pressure here. Come on.
What the hell is going on here? These people are all flatlined. They can't be. They're still moving.
And we get this beautiful moment of the doctor pleading with Death to come back to work. Him finally accepting that all things die and that's part of life.
Bringing me back into the world, you sure that's what you want to do?
Sure. Looks like you're back in business.
And then we get where the episode kind of takes a turn for the worse. You see, it turns out that Death was here to kill the Doctor character. Ooh! And like, this ending is fine. The Doctor dies and he learns to be okay with it. But it's like, it just makes this episode so derivative. If you don't know, there's an episode in the original series which is basically the same thing. A woman is worried about dying. A man comes into her house, reveals that he's Death and that he's come to kill her. And, you know, that's okay. You should be okay with dying.
It isn't me you're afraid of. You understand me. What you're afraid of is the unknown. Don't be afraid.
But I am afraid.
The running's over. It's time to rest.
And it's like, why did you add this twist? First of all, it was obvious. Like, as soon as I read the plot description, I was like, oh, that will probably be the twist. And it was. And it's also really derivative of this older Twilight Zone episode that's frankly better. And it's such a shame because I was loving this episode up until that moment. I feel like if you just cut the episode at when Death kills the rose in his hands, it's great. It's a perfect episode, and I would have praised it to no end. But you add on that ending that's just so derivative and it's unnecessary. And there are things I like about it, like this really subtle hint at what's to come.
It's not just people and animals, it's grass, trees, roses. Bring death to them all. The other day I saw a rose, kind of like this one. For the first time I stopped and I thought, my God, it's beautiful. And I knew I didn't want to kill that rose. Or anything. Or anyone. Ever again.
I think that's a really good speech because on a second watch, you realize he was talking about the doctor. He was ordered to kill the doctor and didn't want to do it because he's such a good guy, so he quit. And I think this is confirmed when the doctor asks him if the man he saved at the start of the episode was his doing or if he saved that patient through his own surgery skills, pro gamer skills.
Hey, there's just one other thing I need to know. That gunshot victim, Fred Jonas, who came in last night, who really saved him, me or you?
If you hadn't been in the room, kid, he would have been in my book.
But, like, you could get that moment even if you cut out the whole death being there to kill him thing. So, I don't know. I'm conflicted. Up until that moment, I was ready to call this the best episode and call this whole series a hidden gem and all that. But it's just, it's really derivative and I don't know. And it's a terrible second episode because, like I said, it's the other side of the coin. You want familiar and new. And this is way too familiar. And yeah, both of these episodes premiered on the same night. I believe they premiered back to back. And they're just not what you would want out of a revival show. So even though I think they're both good episodes, they're not good first impressions for this series. I don't know how I forgot to film this, but I think the episode could have really been improved if there were 4 more nights and it was at Freddy's. If you ask me what should have been the first episode of the series, so a woman is tasked with going back in time to kill...
This is the pride and joy of my household. My son, Adolf.
Already this is a brilliantly cheesy premise. So anyway, she's struggling with killing a baby, even if the baby grows up to be a piece of shit. So there are moments where she could kill the baby, but she hesitates and she runs out of time, right? And the maid of this house, of the Hitler house, she starts to suspect that this girl is here to kill their baby. But eventually the time travel woman decides that I can't live with myself for killing a baby, even if it is baby Hitler. So I'm just gonna take the baby and jump into a lake and we'll both die. And the maid chases after her. She almost stops her, but is unable to do so. The baby and the time traveler die. And the maid's like, fuck, what do I do? And then we get the Twilight Zone twist, which is honestly my favorite twist of the whole series.
Then it felt right then it felt.
It's my favorite. Where have you been?
I had to change the baby.
I feel like this is the most original series E of all of the episodes, but it still feels new. So I feel like this would have made for the best series premiere out of all these episodes. You know, it's a very simple tale about what's the fucking saying? A man's destiny is often found on the path to avoid it. And I also haven't seen much like time travel horror stories. And I think that's such a unique idea. So yeah, there's a reason that this is one of, if not the most well-remembered and well-enjoyed episode. I have no idea why it's the third one and not the first. The pool guy. This one is also pretty well-remembered. Like, it's one of the ones people talk about when they talk about this show. I have no idea why. Like, it's fine, it's okay, but it's also really silly. So basically a man, a pool guy, is being tortured by visions of a man constantly shooting him. It's honestly really funny how this guy just keeps popping up.
I want to introduce an associate of mine, someone who can help you, who knows exactly what you're going through.
That's him. Wake up.
Like, something about it is just so funny to me.
Please don't hurt me anymore. Wake up.
Could you imagine living this guy's life? Just, you could be doing anything, like, I don't know, watching a YouTube video, and then all of a sudden, wake up, David. That meant nothing to like 90% of you, but if your name's David, that might have freaked you out. So anyway, it turns out that he's in a bizarre form of punishment, where he's sentenced to 47 deaths. I feel like people talk about this episode because it is sort of proto Black Mirror. I mean, this idea for a cruel future form of punishment for criminals is literally an episode of Black Mirror, and honestly, I feel like it's done better there. That's done better in Black Mirror's White Bear, and the horrifying idea of VR allowing you to experience horrors endlessly in what is actually less than a second is done better in Playtest. It's okay, I guess. Like, it's not bad, it's just not really my thing, and I don't know why this is one of the most well-remembered and well-regarded episodes. Yes, you read that right. This is a sequel to the original series episode, It's a Good Life. It follows the same kid, grown up. It's the same actor reprising the role, and now he has a daughter who's beginning to develop similar powers to him. I really love this idea, and I'm baffled that none of the other Twilight Zone revivals ever did this. Most of them just opt for straight remakes of original series episodes, which I'll get into later, but is a terrible idea. I think the idea of making a sequel to an original series episode is much better, because there's less of a comparison. You're not just adapting the same story, you're expanding on it, you're continuing it. And while, yeah, this episode doesn't hold a candle to the original, I still think it's a really interesting way to continue the story. I shit on the ending monologues, but I really like how this one just admits there's no morals to this story.
No lesson to be learned here. No morals to be taught. Just an update from Peaksville, Ohio, where Anthony and Audrey Fremont want you to think happy thoughts.
I think it really captures the spirit of the original. Both this one and the original have this just mean-spirited energy to them. It's just about the dangers of absolute power. And like I said, I love that this is actually a sequel and not just a remake. I mean, like, why would you remake a classic episode? Why remake this episode? It just invites comparisons to one of the most beloved episodes of TV ever. So you're setting yourself awfully lofty goals. I mean, credit for that, I guess. Like I said, a revival show like this needs to have the old and the new. And just doing a remake of an old episode is the worst of both categories. I think these remake episodes are meant to draw in fans of the original, like, oh, they remade Monsters on Maple Street, let's see what they did. But I assume most people watched this episode and went, wow, that was just a shit version of the thing I liked. This whole show must be a shit version of the thing I liked. This is probably the most dated episode. Don't you hate it when you got homework due next week and mommy doesn't have all the chicken nuggets to eat? So the original is about a community whose lights begin to turn on and off randomly, and it slowly devolves into a witch hunt looking for who's responsible. And just as the town completely turns on one another,
and this pattern is always the same, with few variations. They pick the most dangerous enemy they can find, and it's themselves. Their world is full of Maple Streets, and we'll go from one to the other and let them destroy themselves.
All they have to do to take over the world is to just rely on humans' paranoia and need for a perpetrator. And in this version, instead of it being aliens, it's the US government fucking with people, and they're like, oh man, you know, this this unique experiment on terrorism is going poorly.
So, in the event of a perceived terrorist attack, isolated communities will sustain themselves for 5 hours.
Do you think they meant to leave the power on at that one house?
Beats me. I'll tell you one thing, if the other civilian security tests went like this, we're all in trouble.
Like, it's just so weird. I just straight up don't get it. I get that this is supposed to be about the war on terror, but what is said by making the government behind it, I guess it's just more about fear of what the government will do to its citizens when it feels the need to. You know, the whole Patriot Act thing of we have to give up some freedoms in order to protect them. Granted, I'm not entirely sure about that because at the time I was busy shitting in my diaper, but I just don't feel like it was necessary to remake this episode. It feels shoehorned in. I think other episodes deal with the war on terror in a much more interesting way, and this is just a completely unnecessary remake. It's forgettable, and I think it harms the series more than it helps. Like, sure, you probably got a lot more people watching this episode because it's a remake of a classic, but how many of them stuck around for the next episode? It's certainly not a terrible remake. It's just unnecessary, not as good as the original, and forgettable. This episode is the most early 2000s out of all of them.
Help me. My son is missing from school. He's been gone for 2 hours. I don't know. His name is Wiley, and he's only 8 years old. There. He got on the bus. They say he got off. Are you reporters? If anyone out there has seen this little boy...
No. We're not reporters. I'm Nick Dart, and you've been chosen as a player on our new reality game show, How Much Do You Love Your Kid?
How much do you what?
This was the first one I saw of this series. I saw it on a rerun when I was a kid, and at the time I was like, man, this show sucks.
Did you see that? Did you see that? They have my boy. Aren't you a real police officer?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Well, then arrest them. Make them talk.
I'm sorry, I can't do that, ma'am. The show is licensed and their permits are all in order.
You can't do anything?
Ain't no rules said the dog can't play basketball.
So this bizarre reality game show kidnaps a woman's child and forces her to play a game to save him.
Excuse me. For the next hour, hang on tight and get ready to expect the unexpected. Because our crews are ready, our vans are gassed up, and our cameras are rolling. On How Much Do You Love Your Kid?
Game show, my child is missing.
Let's make it happen.
Now, this episode is very dated. Obviously, reality shows aren't really a thing anymore. But I think the episode still holds true today. Like, there are plenty of game shows that are still around, and some YouTubers that do similar things. You know, the episode still gets to the heart of humans' desire to turn misery into content.
Donna, I wish I knew.
You don't know? You don't know?
Look, I'm just a host, okay? I mean, I'd tell you if I knew. I'm not the enemy. I'm wearing the same color jersey as you. We're on the same team. I mean, you must understand that this is hard for me, too.
A man is sentenced to execution keeps avoiding it through strange coincidences. And each time he's about to die, he hears a mysterious voice saying, "Not yet. Not yet." Not yet. You need to wake up, David. There's this weird comedy edit in the middle of the episode.
Now, I don't want to hear any talk about visions or voices or guardian angels.
No, I don't know her name, but she definitely had wings.
So
Grady
gets away because everyone believes that this is a sign from God that he is truly innocent. But he accidentally lets loose that he did it.
God, who would have thought the night I walked into that convenience store it would all turn out like this?
You said you were never in that store.
What the fuck is this song? Honestly, the song kind of ruins the episode for me. And then a statue falls on him. It's a fun twist, and even though I had some problems with the presentation, it's a good episode. I criticized a lot of episodes for lacking a sense of karmic justice that was so present in the original show, but this episode has it. But yeah, what was that edit and what was that song? So some college kids go into the caves to explore and discover an old Aztec relic. Man, hazing rituals have really changed. They accidentally tip it and the sun disappears from the sky, and they deduce that they have to make a sacrifice in order to restore things to normal. And after much deliberation, they kill the girl who smelt it and dealt it, and they discover...
Scientists at the Keck Observatory in Hawaii believe that the unprecedented solar blackout was the result of the Earth passing through an extremely rare, low-temperature plasma.
What's he talking about?
A dense, light-absorbing interstellar
We did
cloud.
this, right?
It's a really lovely, bleak ending, and it sort of taps into that Monsters on Maple Street thing, and I feel like it does have something to say about the way we jump to conclusions. You know, if you eat something and then you feel sick later that day, it's reasonable to assume that the food that you ate was what made you sick. But in reality, it could have been anything else that made you sick, and other than the food. But it's just the way we're wired to assume that if two things happen in close proximity, they're related to each other. So I kind of view this as a cautionary tale that we can't fully trust our own brains. It's a really bleak episode, but I really enjoy it. So I talked about some episodes that I found interesting, and I left some of them out. I left a lot of episodes out. There are some really good ones. The Placebo Effect I really enjoyed. The Collection is a fun schlocky one. Memphis is another one. I actually did a full analysis of it, but I cut it out of the video because I felt like the episode just speaks for itself, and I'd rather you just watch the whole thing and experience it yourself rather than just have me describe it to you. So yeah, Memphis is another good one that I didn't talk about in this video. So I ask again, why was this hated? I mean, there are certainly problems with the show. Like I said, the presentation is consistently bad. But for what it is a good little series. Sure, it's not as much of an instant classic as the original series is, but does it really need to be that? It still has something to say, it has unique stories to tell, but it is called the Twilight Zone. Which leads to the main thing that this show has taught me. Don't remake the Twilight Zone. You know, I've read a lot of reviews, and almost all of them just talk about how this show compares to the original. And I'm conflicted because on the one hand, I think you should at least try to take the show for what it is. But also, they called it the Twilight Zone. And I think this show really demonstrates how IPs can be a curse. If this show was named something like Tales from the Spooky Zone, would I even be talking about it right now? But the flip side of that is that you get people always comparing it negatively to the original show. You know, people always say Black Mirror is the new Twilight Zone. It's the spiritual successor to the Twilight Zone. I've heard so many people say that. It's a modern day Twilight Zone. But it's so different from the Twilight Zone. You know, it is much darker. It doesn't have a sense of karmic justice in most episodes, and it's entirely focused on technology. But if you criticize that show for any of those things, people would look at you funny, and rightfully so. My point is, when you have a show as universally beloved as The Twilight Zone, making a revival series is just asking for failure. People have such lofty expectations of what The Twilight Zone is and should be that unless the show's a brilliant masterpiece, it's not going to hit. And this show isn't that. Anyway, the real point I'm trying to make is stay tuned for my reboot of The Outer Limits. Thank you all for watching. That whole joke about the Spooky Zone thing, that's actually based on a real sketch series I did. And it was kind of a parody, but also kind of trying to be real horror. And it was garbage. It's one of the worst videos I've ever made. So I'm gonna leave you with a clip from my The Spooky Zone.
To you. Hey, that's me.
Come to the woods at 3 a.m. If are you willing? Oh, if you are willing. You may bring a friend. I wish someone would just come over here and help me hunt ghosts.
You said 3 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning.
It's
Fuck
bullshit.
that.
Yeah, it's bullshit. Not 3 o'clock in the morning. Let's go now.
Yeah.
Let's go, man.
Fucking piece of shit
Who
ghost
are-
doesn't
who
rule
are
our
you?
life.
Alright, man, let's go.
Alright, I'll meet you there. Uncle Aldul is going solo.
Hey, this is a spot. I mean, it's not 3 a.m. like the card said, but, I mean, you know.
Well, that's the problem because
Three
it's
pit.
lit. It's lit.
Fuck that, we're not going to 3 a.m. It's dark and shit.
Yeah, I bet the ghost would be really fucking pissed off.
Yeah. If he had a weapon, he would want to fucking kill me. Where did Runkle go? What the fuck? What is that noise? Back. Oh shit!
Get back from you.
Is this because I didn't go at 3 a.m.?
No, fuck 3 a.m.
Why are you angry? Oh shit, the ghost is going in my house. Fuck. Should've came at 3 a.m.